welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony, he's Ron, and we're about to uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream and corporate media. I always say we have a lot to talk about. Today is absolutely packed. Lots of kind of court hearings and Supreme Court stories. Maybe we should start with the Supreme Court and their basic, how would you describe it? Overturning of a kind of large portion of the Voting Rights Act. I mean, this is not good for democracy, and it's certainly not good going into the midterms, is it, Ron?
Yeah, I probably have a different take than almost anybody else about this, because this is an issue that I've kind of thought about for decades, as far as how this is interpreted and being implemented ever since, for going back to the 1990s. And so I think that both sides, both parties are overreacting. Mm-hmm. I think this is a very significant decision. I think it's definitely going to impact a lot of people, but I also think it's a situation that could break either way. This could be a decision that could benefit Democrats or Republicans, depending on how the next steps that they take from here. Right. So let me sort of explain what I mean. So before 1990, before the North Carolina decision, Thornburg in 1986 interpreted the Voting Rights Act. Basically, prior to the Voting Rights Act, you had a situation where, particularly in southern states, there was gerrymandering being done to break up black voters into a bunch of little pieces, and where it would take them and dilute their vote by sticking them in, they would be 10% of black vote in a 90% minority white district. So they were breaking neighborhoods, cities up into little pieces so that there would be no black representation. Then the Thornburg decision came down in 1986 that basically said that's illegal, violates the Voting Rights Act. The solution that they came up with throughout the 90s when they redrew the districts after the 1990 census was to make majority minority districts. The result of, in other words, to take basically all the black voters in a state and cram them into one or two or maybe three districts, and doing it in a very creative way, where you see these long squiggly lines, as was the case in this Louisiana case today. That line goes from like the top corner of Louisiana all the way to the bottom corner. And it basically takes, half the black neighborhoods in Louisiana and sticks them all into one district in a thread. So the question is, there are many people, many Democrats, who believe that was not beneficial to the Democratic Party overall. The result of that, it had two results. Result number one was, and by the way, Republicans in the South, in the legislatures, were very happy at the time to create these minority majority districts, because it took all these people who voted 90% Democrat and crammed them all into one district and took them out of all these other districts. So it led to two things. It led to a lot more black representatives in Congress, which was a good thing. And then it did a second thing, which is it led to the gradual extinction of white Southern Democratic representatives in Congress, because they lost all the minority voters from their district. So that's why the result today is such a huge percentage of representatives from southern states who are Democrats are black, compared to what they used to be. So the question now is, how do you handle it from here? Because basically what the Supreme Court said is, you can't specifically do racial gerrymandering. It's sort of like the affirmative action decision, where they said you can take race into account, and you can't go back to the bad old days of trying to specifically break up all the minorities into different.
But aren't they arguing that racism doesn't exist anymore?
Minority districts. What's that?
Right. Isn't that their argument, though, is that there is no racism anymore, and therefore you really can't. You really can't.
The argument is, back in, let's say, 1986, when the Thornburg case was decided, or when the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. If you lived in a 30% black district that was 30% black, it was impossible for a black person to get elected in that district. And what they're saying is, the rationale is, that was a long time ago, and that today that is not as much of a problem. So that's basically the general argument.
And that is a Republican talking point, isn't it? That,
Yep.
if you talk about racism, then there's racism. Whereas if you just ignore it and supposedly just treat everyone the same, that argument, oh, we don't see color. And that is such a dated position, isn't it? Because we want people's color and culture to be seen and understood. And this goes right back to, Trump's whole rhetoric on racism and eugenics and everything else. It's all very kind of underground. This systemic racism, which is baked into American culture, is really coming home to roost with this ruling.
I think that unquestionably, well, first of all, let's just get to the short term and the long term. The short term, people are freaking out about the midterms. And, you have Democrats saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then you got Republicans saying all these maps need to be redrawn before the midterms. First of all, that's not what this decision requires. So that's why I say there's like an overreaction.
Yeah.
First of all, any state that's already had a primary cannot redraw the lines before, if they've already had a primary, and many states have. Also, if we're right up against a primary, many states have their primaries in like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in May. Many southern states have their primaries in May. It's too late to try and redraw any boundaries for them. But there's a handful of states, particularly Florida, which has the latest primary, I think, in the country. It's in August, that they could use this decision to sort of dilute and redraw their maps. And DeSantis has already just submitted a new map this week to do that. So in the short term, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on the midterms at all. The question is past that, because you're certainly going to have both Republican and Democratic states that are going to take this decision after the midterms and try and go back and redraw maps potentially. And Pritzker has already come out and said it. So have a few governors of Republican states. So I think over the long, and you've also had, by the way, Democrats talk about now we need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act if we win the House and the Senate in the midterms to prohibit gerrymandering. And there's all kinds of problems if they go down that road. So really what it's going to come down to is this. It's going to be a gerrymandering war. It's going to be literally like a nuclear arms race of partisan gerrymandering over the next few years, where you're going to have Republican-controlled states drawing some crazy, crazy maps, and you're going to necessarily have to have Democratic states do the same. So it's going to be a tit-for-tat thing. These districts are going to get really crazy because the Supreme Court says you're allowed to do partisan gerrymandering. You just can't do racial gerrymandering.
Let me quote from Justice Samuel Alito, who wrote for the majority opinion. He said, compliance with Section 2 thus could not justify the state's use of race-based redistricting here. The state's attempt to satisfy the Middle District's ruling, although understandable, was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Is the point here, I think, I'll just read something he wrote earlier, which I probably should have read. Allowing race to play any part in government decision-making represents a departure from the constitutional rule that applies in almost every other context. So they position this as being a way to kind of overcome racism. And that's what I find so fascinating about the culture of it, because as I see, I mean, this was a 6-3 majority opinion, party lines, that all of the Trump appointed and the right-wing conservative, whatever you want to call them, justices, as I see it, they are all white supremacists, including Clarence Thomas. And people don't really understand how that's possible. But to me, this is the white supremacists wielding their power, taking back everything that they've had to give away over years, starting with the Civil Rights Act, and really trying to kind of rebalance it so that the white people have all the power.
That could be the result of this decision. It sort of depends on how everything plays out. Like I said, I mean, I do think that there is a way that this could benefit the Democratic Party overall.
Right.
But here's the party. But here's what I think could happen. This is realistically what I think could happen. Okay. Let's say a particular region, clump of states right now has 20 Democrats, let's say lump 4 or 5 southern states together. Let's say they have 20 Democrats in Congress and 12 of them are represented by a black representative. What you could have as a result of this decision is that go up to 22 Democrats getting elected in those, but instead of the 12 black representatives, you're going to have 8. So it's all on your perspective on whether you believe that is a good thing or a bad thing. You could end up having more Democrats, but less black Democrats.
But explain something to me that I don't quite understand, because the similar thing's happening with voter ID, isn't it? Where they're going in with this kind of bullish attack on identification. They're lying, saying immigrants are voting, which of course they're not because it's illegal. And so they like voter ID for everyone, but they don't really have the data to know whether that is going to benefit Republicans in the long run.
You're right. It's the same thing.
This is the same, isn't it?
Absolutely. We have no idea how this is going to play out. That's why I say it's so important for party leaders on both sides to really think this through and have a plan on how to deal with this court decision, because the party that handles the aftermath of this is going to win this. And so it seems to me, from my reading of it, and listening to Jeffries and other people, Democratic governors reacting to this decision, that the Democrats are pissed off and ready to fight this and deal with it in every possible way. I just think I've heard a lot of them say the solution is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but I think that's a big trap that has more problems than solutions. And I think it's a distraction. And I think this is just going to have to be fought state by state. I don't think there's any easy federal fix, because first of all, Trump's going to veto that. Even if the Democrats take Congress, Trump will veto it anyway. But I also think the problem is if you pass that kind of a statute, as soon as the Republicans take over Congress, they can amend the statute and start adding all this voter ID stuff to that particular statute. So once you go down that road of federalizing election rules, it opens a Pandora's box that really could come back to bite you. So I think this is going to have to be fought by Democrats state by state. And it makes two things really, really important. One, it makes local state rep races, very important. Democrats must focus more on doing well in state legislature races, which they have not focused as much on in the past. And you're seeing a shift in that to where they are emphasizing that now. And the second thing it makes really important is the 2030 census. And that means the 2028, who wins the 2028 presidential election is going to be very, very important, because that is going to be the president who is going to preside over the census. And I can tell you that decides how seats are apportioned, whether seats are taken away from Democratic states and given to Republican states, is all based on the census. And so Republicans already have big plans to monkey with the 2030 census. Yeah. As DeSantis talks about it all the time. So that's why it's so important for a Democrat to win in 2028 to make sure that is not messed with.
Well, Trump tried to mess with the last census, and the court stopped it, didn't they?
He did. And then by the time it was finalized, he was out of office.
Yeah. I've got a couple of quotes I want to read. Firstly, from the NAACP, they said it's a devastating blow to what remains of the Voting Rights Act and a major setback for our nation. Barack Obama said that the ruling effectively guts a key pillar of the Voting Rights Act and frees state legislatures to gerrymander legislative districts to systematically dilute and weaken the voting power of racial minorities, so long as they do it under the guise of partisanship rather than explicit racial bias.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Trust Obama to make it so.
Yeah, I mean, Obama said basically what I said in fewer words.
Yes.
But Jeffries, I thought, had some cryptic comments that I thought comported with what my view of it was. Yeah. What Jeffries said is this really isn't going to affect the midterms, and over the long term, this could benefit us if we're smart about how we handle it. That's sort of my position. But I agree. Look, there's no question in 10 years, there's going to be fewer black representatives in Congress than there are right now. No question about that.
What bothers me the most about it, Ron, is that, yes, we can politic around stuff like this, but none of this should be happening in the first place. Because if the United States was a civilized, integrated, true democracy, you would not have a band of white supremacists representing half the voters trying to meddle with the system so that they are prioritized.
Yep.
It's so completely
What I'm saying is, like,
it's
it's the same thing with the gerrymandering that the Republicans are doing now, where I've said this could really come back to bite them if it's a blue wave year, because they're taking safe seats and making them lean seats. And if they start doing this with black voters and start reshuffling them around and moving them into Republican districts, a lot of these are going to go from like safe white Republican seats to toss-up seats if you move in 50,000 black voters into that district. So it's sort of pick your poison. They've got to be, I have no doubt that they'll be very diabolical on how they draw these lines, but if they're not careful, this could really come back to bite them.
Yeah.
And while I don't have much confidence that by the way, along this, think about this. There are 4 black Republicans in Congress right now. We're not talking about the Senate. None of this discussion applies to the Senate.
Right.
We're only, because there's no districts. We're talking about the House only. There's 4 black Republicans, and they're all leaving. Some of them are retiring. Some of them are running for other office. And there isn't one black Republican leading in a Republican primary poll. What does that mean? That means, no question about it, in 2029, there will not be a single black Republican in the House. And I think that the Republican Party it's going to be extremely rare for the Republican Party to ever nominate a black candidate for the House in a majority white district. However, I do think that the Democratic Party would still nominate a black candidate, even if the district is only 20 or 30% black. So I do think in that respect, things are different than they were in 1986 to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, he's already got rid of all the women in the cabinet. I mean,
think about that. Not one black Republican in the House. That's unbelievable, but that's going to happen next year.
But is it unbelievable? I mean, it's
not. That's a bad word.
But this is what I keep coming back to. It's
not unbelievable.
A holistic view of this.
It's shocking, I should say.
Right. We all saw this coming, and that's why I keep pulling it back to white supremacy and fascism, because that ultimately is at the heart of this. And we can report on it in a traditional fashion, or we can basically identify it for what it really is. And I really do believe that the Supreme Court justices are as racist and as white supremacist and misogynistic as Trump himself and many of his henchmen. I actually see them all very politically aligned, even though it's supposed to be a kind of non-political movement. And that's... It's just endlessly frustrating for a European who grew up in a social democracy.
Because if you ask the average Republican, like, what do you think? If you said to them next year, if we said to them, there's not one black Republican in the House, what does that say about the Republican Party? They would say it has no significance. That's what they would say. They would say, if you say it to them right now, if you say, look, how come Trump, the only black person that he appoints to his cabinet in both terms was housing and urban development. Yeah. And that's only because urban's in the name.
Yeah,
so
the
I
word
think
urban,
Trump hears urban and he's like, that's going to be my black person, But so I specifically had this conversation with Republicans. I'm saying, what do you think about that? The fact that he doesn't nominate any black people to his cabinet except for HUD. And they'll say, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. No big deal. Who cares? We're not, because we're colorblind. Race doesn't matter to us, right? We don't think about that. Bullshit. You don't think about that. You go out of your way not to appoint black people. It's the same thing in the military. You look at who is Hegseth running out of the military primarily? Women and minorities.
Are you saying that all Republicans are racist?
No, not all. But I think if you ask them, they would not openly admit to that. But I think like in the privacy of their own homes, in the privacy of their meetings, I'm going to say more than half, for sure. And I think that like tacitly, just subtly, it's probably like in the 80% range, In other words, like trying not to be, trying to deny it, but subconsciously they are.
Yeah. I mean, this is the conclusion that I come to too. And I actually think that there's a lot of people, because, we talk about this in my house all the time, as I'm sure you can understand. And I think that there's a lot of people who don't even realize quite how racist they are. And it's just baked in at a cellular level that on the outside, of course, because they're not saying the N-word out loud, and to them that's what constitutes racism. But because, actually, it's baked in there.
For me, as like a white guy who was like a Republican for a long time, I mean, certainly been in a lot of rooms, a lot of golf course outings or things like that, where you hear racist stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be a part of it. You walk away from it and all that, but
you should challenge it, Ron.
But that is somebody, who absolutely you should. But that is something that like you will never hear from these people publicly. But the second you get them in their living room, the racist stuff starts coming out, and it's just like,
I think that's a really important point, because
that is happening everywhere, all over America.
But that's my point, is that we take so much of this rhetoric with face value because it's what we see for the cameras. But if we were flies on walls in the Oval Office and in the private offices of Trump and his henchmen, there were rumors that he was using the N-word quite freely in his last administration. I mean, I would say that these people are all extremely racist, and they really don't care.
Yeah. Well, I won't say all, but because there are some, but it's a lot more than people expect, and it's a lot more than they would admit. That's for sure.
Let's stay with the courts and the legal system, and let's just talk about James Comey, because this again is quite a fresh story. The Trump regime tried to indict James Comey previously. I think the case was thrown out, wasn't it? And so they're back because Trump has a bee in his bonnet about James Comey. I'm not a fan of James Comey, I'll be honest. I think that he's an idiot. But
that's what Trump does to us, doesn't he? He gets us in these positions where we end up like rooting for people that we don't like.
Well, I'm not rooting for anyone to be indicted.
But like,
right.
I certainly want him to prevail in this case.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you would call that rooting. I want him to win the case, but he does this to us all the time, where it's like, we want people to prevail over his terrible policies, who we don't necessarily like. I just thinking about it today, like Nancy Mace was just destroying Corey Mills, is just a horrible, terrible, unethical person, Republican congressman, and it's just sort of like, I'm here like happy about what Nancy Mace is doing today. It's like, how is that happening? That's what Trump does.
Yeah, it is. It is like being in the Twilight Zone. So let's just talk about the shells on the beach, because this is a very weird thing, isn't it? So it was probably at least a year, maybe 2 years ago now.
It was May. It was 11 months ago.
11 months ago. So James Comey is having some family time, and he posts a picture on his Instagram of some shells on a beach, and they are laid out in the shape of 8647. Now, did he place those shells, or did he just come across the shells? Do we know?
He has never commented about that.
First question I would have asked.
Yes, he well, actually, that's not correct. He's never he did give some interviews right after that. He said that he did not place the shells.
Okay.
That he saw them on the beach and took the photograph. Right. I think he said he was like walking on the beach with his daughter or something.
Yeah. And so he denied that he really understood what 86 meant in this context.
Yeah.
Which is weird for a former FBI director, because if you 86 someone, you get rid of them, or you silence them, or you off them. As far as I know, I mean, it's like a mafia term, isn't it? Or like a New York cop term. from what I understand from the movies. And then 47 is a reference to Donald Trump as the 47th president.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it can be interpreted a lot of different ways. You know,
Yeah.
you could want him impeached. You could want him out of office, you
Right.
know, get rid of is another way.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the way the Republicans interpreted it at the time, because I remember very well when they went nuts over it, was that it was intended to be a signal, like a bat signal,
Right.
that he was putting out to people, you should assassinate Donald Trump. Well, here's the problem. I don't think there's any assassins following James Comey's Instagram. Like, that's not really like, I'm not sure how many people are following James Comey's Instagram. You know, maybe James Comey's family.
Right.
I can't imagine he has a lot of Instagram followers who get his pictures.
Yes.
So that's not exactly like, if you're the former FBI director and you want to call in a hit on the president, that's not really the way you would do it. You know, posting seashells on Instagram.
No, you would book a room at the Hilton when there's a White House Correspondents' dinner. You at least think about it. Yeah.
And by the way, Republicans don't believe that he saw those on the beach either. They think that he is the one who did it. You know, I found the interesting point is that of what Blanche was making a point of in his press conference, which seemed very strange to me, was the fact that they pointed out that Comey deleted it the next day. Now, he's pointing at that as a consciousness of guilt argument, which is I'm very familiar with in criminal laws. When somebody takes some action after the fact that is consistent with somebody who knows that they did something wrong. And I guess one could argue deleting a post suggests that what Blanche argued, is that shows that he knew what he did was wrong. I don't agree with that at all. The reason, because it's rewriting history.
Yeah.
The reason is that he deleted it is because Fox, Newsmax,
they weaponized
on social media, Donald Trump, everybody went absolutely batshit crazy and were attacking him for 24 hours. So he took it down just to get the aggravation. Look, Trump has deleted many posts. It doesn't mean that he agrees that the post was wrong. It just means that he got a lot of backlash, like the Jesus one. He deleted that.
Yes.
Is he admitting that what he did was wrong? No, he doesn't admit what he did was wrong. He just doesn't want to get shit over it anymore. So that's what Comey did. But I thought, you know, Blanche emphasizing that was something that he presented to the grand jury to get the indictment. The fact that he deleted the post, like, all Comey has to do is get on the stand and say, I deleted the post because I was getting all this hate and death threats over it. But it'll never get that far. Comey will never have to testify. This is never going to go to trial. It's going to be tossed out of court as soon as a motion gets presented.
The word I use to describe James Comey, though, is naive. I think he was naive to step up before the election and announce that Hillary Clinton's emails were being investigated. Naive about the consequences of that in our kind of historical timeline.
That probably cost her the election.
Correct. And I think that he's naive here about how Republicans will weaponize anything. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Let's take a look at the FBI director. So weird to say the FBI director, Kash Patel, but here he is.
As you heard from the Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney, former FBI Director James Comey has now been indicted for 2 felony counts. While many of you may read this indictment and view this matter as a simple investigation, it is the farthest thing from that. Every single investigation this FBI and our partners at the Department of Justice undertake, especially those that involve the threats to harm or hurt or even kill individuals, whether they hold public office or civilians in our country, are met with the same measure of investigative prowess and tools and personnel in partnership with the Department of Justice as anyone else. As the U.S. Attorney indicated, James Comey will be afforded every matter of due process under the United States Constitution. And as the Attorney General indicated, this has been a case that's been investigated over the past 9, 10, 11 months. These cases take time. Our investigators work methodically. They are career agents, career prosecutors who work these matters. They call the balls and strikes in the field as they see fit, pursuant to the facts of the case and the law. They took that information and made a presentment to a grand jury, a jury of peers in the district in which the alleged crime took place. And that grand jury spoke, and that grand jury returned a 2-count indictment against James Comey.
Presentment is not a word. I thought I'd just start with that. Abuse of the English language. Let me just play the Todd Blanche clip, and then we'll kind of get into it.
At a place where we can definitively say, to the extent we can definitively say, we will let you know.
Director Comey posted this almost a year ago. Why bring this case now? Did you always feel like this was a strong prosecution, or did something change recently?
This investigation just didn't come now. It's the result of a lot of work by law enforcement over the past year. We don't time when we bring cases around anything other than when the investigation is at a place where we should go to the grand jury, and that's exactly what we did in this case as well.
As a former FBI director,
it shouldn't be the case, Ron, that we don't believe a word that any of these two say.
And nothing they said is true, other than the fact that the grand jury returned an indictment. That was the only factual statement in any of that.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, take it one thing at a time. Kash Patel has been after James Comey for a long time. When he started out as a staffer for Devin Nunes in the House of Representatives on the Judiciary Committee, he was obsessed with James Comey. He's been talking about James Comey and Russiagate nonstop for many years on many podcasts. I've watched them. He's obsessed with James Comey. And when they brought the first indictment over the Russiagate stuff and it was thrown out of court, statute of limitations expired, you know, that enraged them, that enraged Kash. So what has changed? Well, you know, I think that the thing that nobody is talking about in the fact that that Blanche has just arrested or prosecuted or launched investigations on multiple Trump political enemies over the last month is Pam Bondi getting fired. Look, why was Pam Bondi fired? Because, you know, look, I hate Pam Bondi, can't stand her. I think she was the worst attorney general ever. But I think that Blanche is actually worse than Pam Bondi. 100%. I said that before.
Well, he was basically running the DOJ. I mean, she was like running the face, right?
So I think that Trump, when he fired Bondi, was very clear why he fired her. He fired her because he wanted a lot of these people arrested, prosecuted, and she wasn't getting the job done. And I think it's no coincidence that once she's out, all of a sudden, you know, all of these things are happening now. All these people are, this isn't the only one. Who was the other one that was just arrested on some the Southern Christian, Southern Poverty Law Center was just indicted. That happened after Bondi left. There's been the settlement with Michael Flynn just happened. That happened after. I think there was a lot of stuff, not that Bondi didn't want to do it, but I think Bondi had some sense of like, she didn't want to be embarrassed personally. She didn't want to be humiliated personally by losing court cases. And that was always going way back to her when she was district attorney for Tampa. She never wanted to lose a case. So the knock on her back then, 20 years ago, was that she would only charge someone if it was an open and shut case that she couldn't lose. So I think that that's ingrained into her personality. She doesn't like being embarrassed in court. So a lot of these flimsy cases like this Comey one, she put the kibosh on it. Yeah. As terrible as she is, I think she just was her own self-interest. And so I think that now that she's gone, all the guardrails are off. Not that she was much of a guardrail, but I think she was a little bit. And now it's just all hell is breaking loose. And the fact that it took 11 months. Look, I defended thousands of criminal cases, did 300 criminal jury trials, and the delay in arresting somebody is always a big part of the defense. If there is a long delay, you always make a huge deal out of that to the jury, because what you're saying is this was delayed. They have a picture. It's open. There's not additional investigation. It's a picture that he put on, and whatever statements he made about it, contemporaneous, that's your case. That takes a day to put together. You don't need 11 months of an FBI investigation to figure out if you have enough evidence or not. The reason why this was brought is because Trump was furious that none of his political enemies are being prosecuted. He was mad that Comey got his previous indictment thrown out, and he wanted him arrested. And that's why they revived this old BS case, and it will be thrown out like so many of the other ones.
I could talk about this all day. I should just mention that I think Pam Bondi has now agreed to come in and testify about the Epstein files.
Well, after Democrats filed the motion to hold her in contempt of Congress.
So she didn't really have a choice.
Literally, like hours later, she agreed to come in.
Should we talk about the king? Because this is my area of expertise.
No, this is the Anthony Davis section of the show.
Yes, I have met the king. He wasn't the king when I met him, but I have spent quite a bit of time with him and the royals, not through any kind of connection, but I was an announcer in the UK for the BBC and others, and so a lot of the events that I did were royal events, and I also did a lot of kind of charity events that he was involved with. So I have kind of met him, and I consider myself. You see, here's the proof that two things can kind of be equal at the same time. Obviously my politics is very much rooted in my experience growing up in the social democracy, and I really do believe in those things, but I also am a bit of a fan of the royal family.
Man,
and so
like Piers Morgan all over again.
Please do not say that, please.
I knew that would get you.
Very different people.
Sorry.
And so,
but he is, he's a royalist, of course.
Yes, I don't know that I'm a royalist, but I recognise that the UK has.
There's value to it.
It has value. It brings tourists in, and I try to imagine what the UK would be like without the royal family. And I think it would be an absolute dumpster fire. I really do think it holds the country together in many ways. And as unpopular as you might think they are, they're actually more popular. More people care about the monarchy than don't in the UK. So let's start with that. I was dead against King Charles coming to the US to do this kind of faux state visit. I really was not down for it. Obviously, it was essential because the UK burned its bridges over trade, lost its deals with Europe through Brexit. So it really is clinging to
the Iran thing. Trump was yelling at him over Iran. Yeah,
Trump falling out with Keir
Epstein
Starmer.
Issues.
All of the stuff. Yeah, the Epstein issues is massive, actually, isn't it? If you consider the ambassador to Washington turned out to be allegedly one of Epstein's boyfriends. It's ridiculous. But so I was against this coming, but I have to tell you, I have changed my mind.
He handled it well.
Yeah. I mean, not that he wouldn't, because he's very good diplomat.
He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing, and that's why it was so crazy that Trump kept saying, that was a really good speech you gave in Congress. I mean,
he doesn't really get that like half of Charles's speech was like taking shots at him.
I know.
That he didn't understand.
Well, a lot of the humor throughout multiple speeches didn't really land with Trump or the American audiences.
Yep.
And I kind of love that.
Yep.
I do love that. But,
you really have to like understand Europe to get a lot of what he was saying.
Yeah. Let's take a quick.
His speech was kind of like for a European audience almost, or probably for a UK audience.
Well, for an audience that understands sarcasm and irony and all of those things that are sorely missed from the American culture. Let's take a look.
And if I may say so, it is a particular pleasure to be back in this wonderful building, the heart of your democracy. On this occasion, I cannot help noticing the readjustments to the East Wing, Mr. President, following your visit to Windsor Castle last year. And I'm sorry to say that we British, of course, made our own small attempt at real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814.
You can guarantee that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about.
There's absolutely no idea. I mean, of course, what he's talking about is the War of 1812, which I think the British call something else, maybe part of the 30 Years' War or something. But, when they burned the Capitol to the ground, where I think everything was destroyed but the post office. So that's what he's talking about. Of course, Trump has no idea about any of that. And he's acting like, he knows
Yeah.
That was the funny part, is that he kept telling these jokes that like Trump had no idea what he was talking about, but he's like pretending that he did.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's also, you know, taking a little dig at him for demolishing the East Wing, for all the remodeling that he's doing.
Right.
And he also mentioned that he did it after he visited Windsor Castle, which also kind of takes you back to like that Windsor Castle trip, which a lot of people forgot, when they just drove him. They didn't even hold the official parade thing. They just put him in the carriage and drove him around the castle a couple of times and make him feel good, you know.
Well, they've played him and manipulated him multiple times, because
he's kind of, I think right there, he's kind of like making fun of that whole thing, you know,
100%.
in a subtle way.
Yeah. It's been very interesting, because Trump said that America, or the UK America will never have a greater friend than the UK. And he did that in a kind of very disingenuous way, because it was made to sound like it goes both ways. But he didn't say that that the UK will always have a great friend in America. So he basically made it seem as if the UK was the junior partner in this relationship. And he did a whole bunch of things that were completely against protocol. I mean, calling him Charles all the time is so completely offensive. You know, you do not have the right to call the king by his first name when he's in your presence. And I don't know, I just feel like this was an opportunity for Donald Trump to assert his authority as a king. And of course, he posted on Truth Social that you know, a picture of the two kings, thinking that he could get away with that somehow. I mean, go on.
It shows you what a coward he is too, to like people's faces, because this comes after weeks and weeks of just trashing the UK and saying that they're terrible and they're no good and they're not our friends anymore and they're not our allies. And then, you know, he gets in front of the king and then he's like, "You're our best friends." Yeah. And I saw some quote from like a British MP. I'm not sure who it was. I don't remember, but he responded to that comment by posting on social media. He said, "We're not, we used to be, you know, the closest friend and ally of the United States, but no, we're no longer. That's now Israel." You know, so I thought he made a good point.
That was actually not an MP. That was the new ambassador to Washington.
Oh, okay.
And that was a leaked line that came out and was very embarrassing, because it came out on the same day as the state visit.
It was true.
Well, this is an interesting point. Let's take a look at Trump cutting in front of Queen Camilla. I mean, he cut in front of Queen Elizabeth at the last one. Let's see him walking in the wrong direction again.
I mean, I just crack up every time I see that. You got to watch like Camilla's face and Charles's face when he cuts in front of them. Yeah. Charles is just like, "What are you doing, man?" And
I'm
Camilla
sure people know
baffled.
Charles and Camilla think Trump is the worst human on the planet. Like, they think he is a complete idiot. And I think that's why, because King Charles does have a great sense of humor, and has done ever since he, you know, took part in drama and comedy classes, you know, in university. I mean, he's a bit of a performer and always has been. And so I think this was an opportunity to do that kind of level of comedy that went over Donald Trump's head. And so the rest of us obviously are able to kind of watch it and be like, "Oh, okay, there he goes. But Trump just missed all of it.
Well, because they could have played that off and acted like nothing was happening and there was nothing wrong there, but they did not. I mean, they made it obvious with their body language and their look on their face that this was a buffoon. They didn't say anything, but it was obvious to everyone watching that clip that they thought this is an idiot, you know.
I wonder how it's going to kind of play out, because you know.
And I'm also somebody who like wanted the monarchy to go to William and skip over Charles a few years ago. I kind of admit I was wrong about that, because he seems to be.
Yeah. Well, because he's been rehearsing for decades. I mean,
I was Team Diana too for a long time.
were you?
In the
Okay.
divorce.
All right.
you know,
Yeah. No.
so
I mean, everybody's
I'm a
got
little
to take a
biased.
side. I totally understand. And then let's just talk very quickly as a brief aside about the Trump passport announcement, because I thought this was interesting timing. I know that in the British passport, and I'm sure it's in the US passport as well, but in the inside front cover, there's like a declaration of how you'll be protected by the sovereignty of your nation. And, it's quite actually interesting to kind of read the inside front cover of a passport, certainly a British passport. But Donald Trump has decided that not only does he want his face plastered over the Department of Justice and on coins and commemorative this and that, but he also wants his face inside the new American passport. So if you're going to renew your passport anytime soon, he is taking full licensing and branding for the 250th anniversary of the United States. What do you think about this? You're the American in this relationship.
I mean, there are actually people that have been running down to the passport offices trying to renew their passport early and willing to pay the $70 or whatever just to like get in ahead of the queue here before this happens, because I think it's supposed to happen this summer. I mean, we could laugh about this, but honestly, this is a problem.
Yeah, it's very.
I mean, I think him putting his signature on currency, which no president has ever done before. He puts his name and face on everything. He put his face on the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, these big banners. This is what authoritarians do. It's the cult of personality. It's not something that Americans have ever done before. My concern is that it's always something that Americans have recoiled from and rejected out of hand and didn't tolerate either party. And now you have a situation where the Republican Party fully embraces it, is all in on this cult stuff. And, it's a big problem, because the United States is not supposed to be about a person, any one president, not a man. It's about a set of ideals. It's about a founding document, all of that. It's why we don't have a royal family. Our state is built. We're an unusual situation in that our country is built around a piece of paper, a document, not a person. But Trump doesn't see it that way. Trump never has. Trump thinks when you become the president, you are the supreme ruler of the country. And what is it going to be? What is it going to be next? It's endless. It's the ballroom, the reflecting pond, the triumphal arch.
Yes, the Arc de Trump.
Everything with his name on it, everywhere. And we know he's been like this his entire life, of course. He's put his name on every single thing since the 70s. But
he wants a legacy now, doesn't he?
Doing it to the country.
Yeah.
He could do it on his own stuff all he wants. Nobody cares. But doing it to the country and our monuments and all that is a different situation.
I think that he thinks he is the country and the country is him. Yeah. And to me, this was confirmed when he, met the Japanese Prime Minister, and he said to her, "Well, you didn't give me any warning about Pearl Harbor," and was doing this whole thing about the element of surprise, like he was, the president in 1943. And this is something that, is very concerning, is that he cannot differentiate between him and the United States of America.
Yep. No, he doesn't, and he doesn't want to. In fact, he always, when I've said this many times on social media and other places, that in any Trump speech or any Trump quote, anytime he talks about the country of the United States, if you substitute his name, then it makes sense what he's saying. Then you know what he's really saying.
Yes.
So whenever Trump uses America or the United States, if you substitute Trump and reread what he just said.
So like when he says they hate America, what he's actually saying is they hate me.
Yes.
They hate Trump.
Every single time, 100% of the time. If you go back and you change that, like the country to him, then everything he says makes sense.
People need to realize this might be a problem if they haven't already.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about the ballroom because apparently now taxpayers are going to be paying for it. And we also have that little minor story about an attempted assassination on the president during the Correspondent's dinner. We'll do that and a whole lot more next on Uncovered. I'll be honest, life insurance was one of those things I kept putting off. It felt complicated and I didn't really want to think about worst-case scenarios. But after seeing a close friend's family struggle financially after an unexpected loss, it kind of snapped things into perspective for me. It's not about fear, it's about being prepared. That's why I started looking into options, and what stood out to me about Ethos is how simple they make the whole process. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam, you just answer a few simple health questions online, and you can get up to $3 million in coverage with some policies as low as $30 a month. It really is about helping provide financial security and helping protect the people you care about, without turning it into this overwhelming process. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos. Get up to $3 million in coverage in as little as 10 minutes at ethos.com/uncovered. Application times may vary, rates may vary. Take 10 minutes to get covered today with life insurance through Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/uncovered. That's ethos.com/uncovered. And you can find links to our sponsor in the description below. Okay, Ron, let's just strike off the ballroom before we go any further, because this actually is a huge issue for Donald Trump. He is a real estate mogul after all. That's all he really seems to care about. And I think if he was given the choice, you wouldn't do anything else other than extensions and erections, if you'd pardon the language. What is this latest twist, though, on the ballroom?
I said this to the guys when this happened, with Midas in our text chain, was that Donald Trump's superpower, he has a few little things that have propelled him to the presidency. One of them is that throughout his life, going all the way back to the 70s and 80s, nobody knows how to capitalize on violent crime and use it to their advantage like Donald Trump. I mean, he built his entire campaign around the Lake and Riley murder, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was literally like 70% of his ads was based on that one. He waits for these things to happen. And then he pounces, and then he jumps all over them and takes advantage of them and uses them as political capital. He turns violent crime into personal political capital. So when this incident happened, I mean, we saw it also during the shooting thing in Butler, right? I mean, literally 2 seconds after that happened, he was turning it into a political message.
Well, creating an iconic image that he knew would go around the world.
He milked that. I mean, so you think about it, really, like, if you want to say what are the two reasons why Trump won, if you want to point to, I mean, I'm going to say Lake and Riley and Butler are the two biggest reasons, and both of which are violent criminal episodes that he turned to his advantage, and this is his playbook. It has been for years. I mean, let's not forget, this is a guy who took out the full page ad in the New York Times accusing innocent people of doing the Central Park rape back in the like 1982. Right. This guy's been using this stuff for years. And so here you have a situation of this ballroom shooting. And by the way, the guy never got anywhere near the event. He was on a different floor, all of that tackled right away. In other words, Trump was never like in danger. But Trump immediately, think about this, and this tells you how his mind operates, immediately goes in front of the cameras, holds a press conference, and says, "This is why we need the ballroom." I mean, it was like unbelievable. It's like you follow it. My first reaction whenever he does stuff like this is just like, oh my God, I can't believe he's now using this for the ballroom. And my second reaction immediately after that is, because of course he is, because this is who he is.
But this is where the conspiracy theories that this
Of course, it
assassination
launches
attempt
conspiracies.
are allowed to flourish because Trump
Yes.
makes room for these things.
Of course, because he turns it to his advantage. So everybody
Yeah.
naturally says like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How is he using this right away? It almost seems like he expected this to happen. He's ready to
It's
go.
unreal.
He's got a plan.
100%.
But I think that maybe some of the conspiracies, there could be something to them, but also at the same time, I think like it's a natural instinct for him. It's part of his predator instinct that he understands how to turn tragic, violent situations instantly to his advantage and to play into that. That is one superpower that he has. That's why I say he's not an intelligent man. He's not wise, but he's cunning. That's the one thing.
Yeah.
He's very cunning. And he knows how to manipulate. He's a master manipulator. And look how he did it with this. He literally had half the Republicans in Congress go from not wanting to talk about the ballroom at all and avoiding any questions about it to running in front of cameras saying taxpayers should now pay for it. I mean, the guy is just, that is a superpower.
Is it because the private donors who were going to be paying for it, and remember it started at 150,
you make a good point now,
right, and then it went up to 200, and then it was 250, and we were reporting on it, and then it was like a $300 million ballroom, and then it was a $400 million ballroom, and
now listen,
all the while I was thinking, this is the same as those false promises that have been made about investment into the US from various companies. That never comes to anything.
We're like thinking alike now. Too much is scary.
Symbiosis. So here's our conspiracy.
This was my exact thought the other day.
So he's not got the money for the ballroom. So he needs to come up with a plan that suddenly changes public opinion on the ballroom. So an assassination attempt is a perfect opportunity to do that. I'm not saying that
100%
he's behind it. I'm saying, but he did use it for that purpose.
I said on this show a few months ago, I remember it very well.
Yeah,
that he did not have the money for the ballroom. That he got pledges, like the Jerry Lewis telethons. He got people that called in and promised to give, and it was the same thing with the investments in the U.S.
Right.
And that when he was negotiating the tariff deals,
how many times did we hear about
$14 trillion? None of it ever happened.
No.
But he got promises, he got pledges, and he sold them as like money that he already had.
Yeah.
Money that was like in a bank account for him to invest in the United States when none of it was real. So when he was out there saying that he had $400 million he never said exactly how much he had. He just said it's all going to be paid for by donors. But as you said, the price kept going up. It went from 100 to 150 to 200 to 250 to 350. And the whole time he just kept saying, I got donor money for all this. He didn't have nothing. He had pledges. He did not have checks. So I predicted back then on this show, I said, in the end, what he's going to do is he's got enough seed money to start this ballroom, to get a hole in the ground, to destroy the East Wing, and to make it so that we are in a position where he's out of the money. He doesn't have the money to finish this, and taxpayers are going to have to pay because otherwise we're going to have this giant hole in the ground next to the White House. I always believed that taxpayers were going to pay. The problem is this ballroom was deeply unpopular with the American people. Something like 30% or something wanted the ballroom, thought it was a good idea. So how can you possibly get taxpayers to pay for this thing when they don't even want it to happen, even with donor money? Well, now we see he's using this incident as his argument because we're not safe. We can't have a safe event at the White House unless we have this ballroom facility. But the question is, are Republicans actually going to vote, pass something like this? Because that's a whole different ball game. I think they're going to try and like slip it into like the defense budget or something like that. they're not going to have a standalone bill just for ballroom money, because that will never fly. They're going to try and put it in pieces in other parts of the budget.
The other thing that this throws up for me is how Trump can be manipulated by foreign nations and business leaders and people that want to curry favor with Trump in the short term. And that's why you don't allow a president to run roughshod over the protocols and the rules of a construction project or anything, because it can be used to manipulate him. So he's been manipulated by all these people that have said they're going to pay for it, for whatever they needed in the short term. I'm sure that he changed a little this or did an executive order there in return for these pledges.
Because we're finding things out in like little dribs and drabs,
Right.
you know, about this. Like we found out that because he was asked about it directly, where's the marble coming from? I mean, where's the granite coming from?
Yeah.
The granite turns out, we have amazing granite quarries here in the United States, in Georgia, Vermont, New Hampshire. New Hampshire's the granite state, North Carolina. But no, where did Trump get the granite for the ballroom? Africa. And where is it being finished? Italy.
Yeah.
No part of it is coming from the United States. We learned that the steel was donated by, I think, Switzerland or something. Some country in Europe donated the steel. So all of this stuff is coming from foreign governments to build the White House ballroom. I thought this guy was about America first. And none of this was openly stated, because that's why you have to have public hearings and congressional involvement, because if you start laying this out that all these foreign companies are going to be contributing, stuff to the White House ballroom, that's when you're going to have objections if you have a public hearing. Yeah. But instead, we find all this stuff out after the fact, after Trump has already done it, which is how he does things.
I mean, it's no wonder that his businesses endlessly collapsed and he went bankrupt and he couldn't even run a casino. I mean, we really are seeing how completely incompetent he is as a business operator. And this argument that, you've got to have a business person running a country. My dad used to say that. My late father would say that. It would drive me crazy. I'd be like, a country isn't a business. I mean, I appreciate that the US probably is a little more like a business with an executive than the UK is. But, it just isn't a business. And this is a perfect example of why you can't run it like one.
I mean, look at some of our greatest presidents were not really business people, right? Washington, Lincoln,
Yep.
FDR wasn't a business person.
Right.
I mean, our greatest presidents were not business people. Eisenhower,
Nope.
So.
I mean, I personally think business people should be nowhere near government of any kind. Let's take a look at Lindsey Graham.
I guess you could say Jefferson was involved in business. It was farming, but he didn't have to hire his labor. He purchased it. So I don't know if that counts.
And not anymore, it doesn't. All right, let's take a look.
And if we fail, we'll have to go to Plan B. Yeah.
Senator, some of your fellow Republicans have said taxpayers should not have to foot the bill for this ballroom, that the president should be able to raise private money to fund it.
I disagree with them. We're going to vote no. Just vote no. This is what I like about voting. If you don't think $400 million of taxpayer money is a good investment to create a secure facility at the White House where the President of the United States, the Vice President, the Cabinet, and people from the public can come and, have a meal and gather without what happened Saturday, then I disagree. This is the number one job of the federal government is national security. The number one job of national security, I think, would be to protect the commander in chief and to have infrastructure under the ballroom that is very national security centric. So I don't think, just vote no. That's all I ask you to do is vote. I don't care how you vote. I want to vote. I want to see where is America on this. I'll bet you 90% of the people would love to have a better facility than the Hilton Hotel to make sure this crap never happens again. I can't tell you what to say on the Senate floor, but I've never seen it like this. There are people out there just one click away from picking up a gun or something else and trying to make America better by killing. You don't make America great by killing people you don't like.
Well, yeah.
So it's either that or it's either we have a $400 million monstrosity
the Hobson's
ballroom
choice.
that's 10 times the size of the White House.
Yeah.
Or, everybody just gets killed. That's your binary choice, according to Lindsay, right? It's like we have to have the ballroom or everybody's going to die. I mean, it's just these people are preposterous. They're ludicrous.
Also, the Hilton Hotel seats like 2,500 people. The ballroom's only going to seat 1,000 people.
And this is the White House Correspondent Center. They're not going to have it at the ballroom anyway.
No.
So, no, I mean, it's yes, we want to have a secure president. That's why we spend so much money on Secret Service and all these limos and Air Force Ones. And we spend a monstrous amount of money to make sure the president and his family are safe and secure. But that doesn't necessarily include, a $400 million ballroom with zero public input. If they had public hearings on this and the public got involved and you had input and you had congressional hearings and everybody gave their opinion and then they came up with a new ballroom for the White House at the end of the day, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Right.
I have a problem with the way that he's doing it.
Yeah.
Just tearing down the East Wing and building some monstrosity without anyone having a say in it.
Let's talk. We don't have a huge amount of time. We've got so much to discuss. Let's talk a little bit about this shooting quickly, because basically this guy who Trump was very happy to say is from California. He's obviously from California, and a lot of the Fox News have been saying this as well. The guy was from Torrance, and quite an upstanding citizen in Torrance who clearly felt aggrieved by the administration, wrote notes, left stuff in the hotel room, booked the hotel room a few nights out, traveled across the country with his weapons, crossing state lines with his weapons, entered the hotel with his weapons. Of course, a few days before, there was no security, really. I mean, the whole thing is just jokes.
By the way, Stephen Miller's wife, Katie, blamed it on Gavin Newsom, saying that right. Gavin Newsom's inflammatory rhetoric motivated this guy.
That's what did it. I mean, if you're going to do this, because I see it as a kind of a screenplay in my mind, like that CCTV that we saw of him running through the security line. Really, like, why not dress up as a waiter? Why not have a tray with your gun under the tray with glasses on it so that you can at least get into the ballroom? There wasn't a lot of planning involved in this, was there?
This was not the most sophisticated.
It was not sophisticated.
Assassination plot.
In my mind, it's like Ocean's 11 or something, where there's like some clever moves involved. But none of that really happened, and he didn't really get anywhere near the president. But what we've seen from clips is very interesting, because we don't yet know whether it was the suspect who fired his weapon or whether it was law enforcement.
Doesn't seem that it was.
Right?
I think we're going to find out that one Secret Service agent shot another one.
I think so. And it was wearing a bulletproof vest, so was protected. But did you notice how they evacuated J.D. Vance before they even bothered with Donald Trump? I mean, that was quite weird, wasn't it?
It was, and it was also weird to have like everyone in the line of presidential succession at one table.
Yes.
Which is, they try not to ever do that. It was very in a public
the Iranians
place.
Could have bombed the hotel, couldn't they?
Sure. I mean, if you had somebody that was a lot more sophisticated than this knucklehead, then certainly something like that could have happened. So it's I think that the other thing is they charged this guy with attempted assassination of the president. Now, all I can say is there was nothing in his manifesto that mentioned Trump. He talked about members of the administration, but he didn't specifically say that he was targeting Trump. So unless he has that, he confessed to that, or he has that.
Well, he did say
else
rapist and pedophile, didn't he? And Trump took that as meaning him.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's going to be kind of difficult for them to prove that he had the specific intent to assassinate Trump.
Yeah,
and that's what they've charged him with. I was a little surprised when I saw the charges.
Me too,
because I was like, how are they going to prove that? I mean, clearly they can prove, like reckless endangerment or intent to, mayhem or whatever, discharge firearms, illegal possession of firearms. I mean, there's a whole litany of charges they could have hit him with, but they chose that he attempted to assassinate the president of the United States. I mean, I've defended thousands of cases. A lot of my trial wins, there was only one reason for the win, and that's because they overcharged the person. They charged him. They could have convicted my client for something less, but they overshot the mark.
Yeah.
A lot of my wins came that way, and I could potentially see something like that in this particular case.
Well, Todd Blanche is completely unqualified for the role of acting DOJ boss, isn't he? So, I mean, is it any wonder? Should get Pam Bondi back. Let's talk very quickly, though, about how the media handled this story. There was a lot of criticism that the media just mismanaged the way that this was covered. Let's start with CNN and Dana Bash.
Yeah, and you have, as many of your fellow Democrats, have used some heated rhetoric against the president. And do you think twice about that when something like this happens?
What rhetoric do you have in mind?
Just talking about some of the fact that he, is terrible for this country and so on and so forth. I understand that that's your Democratic right, but overall, do you
I have
have
no
a responsibility?
personal problem with Donald Trump at all. I mean, I talk about the policies of this administration, the authoritarianism like we saw on display in Minneapolis, where 2 of our citizens were gunned down in the streets simply for exercising their First Amendment rights. Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and others have, died in custody. I'm talking about policies. I don't personalize it, and I certainly have never called the press the enemy of the people. I think the press are the people's best friend, and that's why it's written right there into the First Amendment. We need the press to be a vigilant watchdog against every level of government, federal, state, local, all of it.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that. Before I let you go,
I always knew Dana Bash was a wrong 'un. Honestly, I mean, where is this stuff coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't entirely thrilled with Raskin's answer either. I have a personal problem with him. It's not just his policies.
Yeah.
It goes much beyond his policies. It's the fact that he's a malevolent, angry, racist SOB who hates a lot of different people and groups,
and hates
particularly
America.
vulnerable groups. Yeah, and so I have a personal problem with him. I suspect Jamie Raskin does too, but I think in that particular moment he was trying to downplay that. But, the broader issue is how the press handled this, particularly CNN, and the aftermath. And I'm talking about a lot of them. Tapper, Stelter, the media critic, Bash, a bunch of them.
Yes.
The only one who didn't was the one guy like Boris guy. He was really good about it. But other than him, I thought the coverage on CNN was pretty bad. And, there's this tendency after these incidents to like, Trump is the victim, we have to empathize with him, and we got to both sides this. Democrats have criticized him a lot, and they've called him a Nazi and a fascist. Well, as she mentions a little bit in a footnote, that is our right. Yes, that is what American citizens have done since the very first president. I mean, there was vicious name calling and attacks on Adams and Jefferson and Madison. I mean, Andrew Jackson. I mean, this is part of the Abraham Lincoln. They called him every name in the book. Gorilla, ape. They said he was gay. There was he was a Neanderthal. You go back, this is part of America. We have always viciously attacked our political leaders. It's part of the DNA of this country. So to suggest that Democratic elected officials or activists, because they went to no King's rallies or because they called Trump a fascist, are in some way responsible for these acts is asinine. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that's what I would say. If I was sitting across from her, that's what I would have said. I wouldn't have answered it the way Raskin did, but he's more of a gentleman than I am. I
didn't want to say anything. Let's take a look at Brian Selter and his kind of response as well, because again, it's just weird to me.
Prior to this whole event, there was concern about the president coming to this event for the first time and attacking the media, right? Now, events take a different turn, a violent turn, and the president had a different kind of message.
A very different message, a message actually of unity, and a message that I think brought the temperature down. It was a message that tried to cool things as opposed to intensify or heat things up. And I think that's important to note, because this president, given 10 years of rhetoric against the media, in the past year, his administration taking many actions to investigate and sue and take action against the media, he very well could have immediately turned around and tried to blame the press. Yeah. He could have immediately tried to claim that the press was out to get him. Now, in this case, with the suspect, we don't know what he was thinking. Right. We don't know if this event was just a crazy magnet, and that's what happened with this magnet. We don't know if he was there trying to shoot at journalists or trying to shoot at the president. But
that's key. We do not know his target, as the police said. That'll be part of the investigation.
Targets plural, because he brought multiple knives and multiple guns. So we don't know. But you imagine a world where the American president could have very easily tried to make a bad situation even worse. And he did not choose to do that at all. In fact, he invited the press corps to run back to the White House for a press conference. And so I think that was a very American gesture, a very American statement.
Please spare us. This is journalistic malpractice at its finest, Ron.
It's just incredible. I mean, Republicans call him Mr. Potato Head. They called Stelter, and I thought that was always kind of mean, but I feel like calling him Mr. Potato Head right now. I mean, the CNN coverage was especially sickening, and I can't help but notice, that CNN was just bought out by the Ellisons, or that they're now no longer part of the same ownership group, and they're going to get some MAGA Trump adjacent owners here, and I can only surmise, speculate that the reason for their change in tone and coverage of Trump, we're seeing this from many of their hosts, not all, is a result of that. I mean, we've seen it at CBS, certainly.
Yeah. Well, everybody has their price, clearly, and these people are selling their souls to the devil.
And the funny part is, literally, first of all, what Stelter's praising him for is the fact that he didn't blame the media for this guy immediately afterwards. Yeah. No, that was when he was arguing that he should get a ballroom. Yeah. So he was focused on the ballroom. So we're supposed to give him brownie points, bonus points, that he was only trying to get taxpayers to pay for a ballroom in the wake of this rather than attack the press. Well, the problem is, literally 2 hours after Stelter made that appearance, Trump was on Truth Social attacking Democrats and Jimmy Kimmel and blaming the media. And so it's these guys never learn. Whenever they say, oh, Trump has really struck a new tone with this speech or with that comment, I always, wait 4 hours and he'll immediately undo that because it's phony, it's fake, it's not real. And for some reason, after 10 years of this, these idiots still don't understand it.
Trump is a rogue president who has changed the US, which didn't have a great track record for its democracy with the Electoral College and everything else, into a pariah state on the world stage. I mean, other nations now are negotiating directly with Iran so that they don't have to go through the US, because they know the US is screwing everything up and elongating the war. I mean, the global order has shifted because of Donald Trump in this second administration of his. Let's jump to Pete Hegseth, talking of Iran. He gave the weirdest testimony. This was this morning, I think, wasn't it? This is arguing, I mean, every time he says the word quagmire, you have to take a shot. Let's take a quick look.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance. I didn't see a question in the statement from the congressman. I hope you appreciate how reckless it is. When I said reckless, feckless, and defeatist of congressional Democrats at the beginning, that came after watching you say the same thing on CNN this morning, a quagmire. My generation served in a quagmire in Iraq and Afghanistan, years and years of nebulous missions and utopian nation building that led us to nothing. What we have right now, the way you stain the troops when you tell them 2 months in, Congressman, you should know better. Shame on you. Calling this a quagmire 2 months in. The effort, what they've undertaken, what they've succeeded, the success on the battlefield that could create strategic opportunities, the courage of a president to confront a nuclear Iran, and you call it a quagmire, handing propaganda to our enemies. Shame on you for that statement. And statements like that are reckless to our troops. Don't say I support the troops on one hand and then a 2-month mission is a quagmire. That's
okay, I'll cut him off because he goes on and on. But this, again, is another opportunity for Pete Hegseth to expose himself as being bonkers and clearly the wrong man for the job. He was also asked, I mean, I watched quite a bit of this testimony this morning, and he was asked whether or not he directly recommended the attack on Iran to the president, and he kind of refused to answer the question. I mean, a lot of this is going to come back to haunt him, isn't it?
So while he was talking, I looked up on my phone the current oil price, crude oil price.
Yes.
Because I've been watching it go up all day like a slot machine. And that's the reason for the reason why the congressman called it. First of all, before I get to that.
Okay.
Pete Hegseth always does this. Whenever any Democrat or any person criticizes the war, he conflates that with you're attacking the troops, as he did right there. He's saying,
right,
you're insulting the troops. And this has nothing to do. There is not one single Democrat who has ever criticized any pilot, any soldier, any general, any person involved in the prosecution of this war. 100% of the criticism has been on Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth.
Yes.
Nobody else.
Right.
Two people.
Right.
So when he says, oh, by criticizing me, you're criticizing those troops, is asinine. It's just completely ridiculous. So that's one thing that really bothers me about him when he tries to deflect. He tries to put criticism onto troops when it's at him.
Yeah.
They never accept personal responsibility. That's number one. And the reason why the congressman this morning was on CNN saying this was a quagmire is because of what Donald Trump told Axios at 7:00 this morning.
Yes.
One of the rare occasions where Axios printed a Trump statement that resulted in the oil markets going up instead of down, because usually he launders happy talk.
Yeah.
Through. That's right there. So that was like an hour ago before we started the show.
Right.
It's now at 108.49.
Yep. There it is.
There it is right there. So it's 108.49 as during it was 102 this morning. That is an 8.5% increase in less than a day. You're going to see that at the gas station tomorrow. Go down to the gas station tomorrow and compare that with the prices from Friday. They're going to go up significantly.
Oh,
gas
yeah.
is going to be over $4. We're ahead. The leading expert on the gas market, to me, Patrick DeHaan, said today, we are headed for $4.50 a gallon gas. Because what Trump told Axios this morning was, there is no end in sight. He is going to continue this blockade indefinitely with no specific end date. He's going to resume bombings, and we just have no end in sight for this war. Now, the reason why the oil prices have been tamped down somewhat is because Trump has been consistently saying that this was going to be over in 4 to 6 weeks. This is now week 9. And on week 9, he tells Axios on Monday morning, there's no end in sight. That's why the congressman called it a quagmire. And so for Hegseth to claim that that is an irresponsible statement is once again asinine on his part.
Okay, let's whiz through our topics. Talk to me about the Make America Healthy Again movement and this story regarding the glyphosate, isn't it? That's how you say it, glyphosate.
So I'll go through this quickly because it is a very important story that's kind of flying under the radar.
Yeah.
So the MAGA movement, the RFK movement, RFK sort of made a name for himself suing was Monsanto at the time. Now it's Bayer, the Roundup.
Yeah.
For the chemical in there causes cancer and all of that. And there's a big case now that was just argued in front of the Supreme Court on Monday, which was and by the way, did I say the Axios story is on Monday? Today is Wednesday. I lose track of days. But on Monday, case was argued in front of the Supreme Court by a gardener, a lifelong gardener who got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and is blaming it on the chemical in Roundup. He used Roundup his whole life. So Trump issued, and by the way, RFK Jr., one of the biggest lawsuit of his life that he got the most money on was specifically suing Roundup over this particular chemical. And he pledged as part of his campaign to ban this chemical. So now he's in charge of the FDA. And what does he do? Trump issues an executive order, not only continuing this chemical, but encouraging increased domestic production of it. And now what Republicans are trying to do is stick a provision in the Farm Bill, which was supposed to be voted on this morning, which would prohibit anyone from being able to sue chemical companies for this chemical causing them cancer.
Yeah.
And so the MAGA people, the RFK, are beside themselves right now. And when they asked RFK about it, well, this has been you crusaded against this company and this chemical for decades. And now all of a sudden, Trump is issuing these executive orders encouraging more production of it. And he says, well, you know, I support the president, and we got to do something to help out our farmers. They're struggling right now, and we got to have them, until we come up with something better, we got to let them use this chemical. So you have the MAGA movement saying, look, we're staying home for the midterms. A lot of their activists are going nuts right now over this. They held a big protest in front of the Supreme Court. Thomas Massey was their headline speaker. So you have this handful of Republican representatives who are MAGA allies who are speaking out about this provision in the Farm Bill. So what happened this morning is Luna presented an amendment, Anna Paulina Luna,
to
try and strip that out of the Farm Bill, the protection of the company. And this is from this morning.
Yeah, she said, I've been accosted by 2 Republican members of Congress for trying to remove pesticide liability protections, both of which claim to be God-fearing Christians, but are shilling for cancer-causing pesticide companies. Yikes, she says. I mean, this is what you were saying earlier about how your allegiance towards people you don't like has had to shift.
So you have a situation here where you have the RFK Jr. MAGA activists who all voted for Trump, who are now against farmers because it's the farm lobby that wants this as part of the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is a bunch of cash for farmers that are struggling because of Trump's tariffs and war in Iran. So it's to help bail them out. But they also stuck in there something to keep them from getting sued if they use this chemical. And so what Luna's trying to do is take that out. So it's literally like the MAGA movement against the farmers, 2 Trump constituencies fighting with each other. So the end result was this morning was that Farm Bill was packaged with the DHS funding bill and a couple other little things. And they were all supposed to be voted on this morning. But since that blew up, Luna has like 6 or 7 Republicans who are allied with her, and all Democrats are against it. They're with her on this particular issue. So there's not enough votes to pass the Farm Bill because they stuck this in there. So what happened is they passed everything else this morning, but the Farm Bill did not pass. It wasn't voted on. It was sent back to the Rules Committee. So literally like relief money to bail out the farmers didn't happen today because of this provision trying to protect Bayer, which, by the way, yesterday, Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, admitted in his testimony before Congress that before that executive order was issued, he met in his office with the Bayer CEO specifically about this.
Let's just quickly catch up on AOC explaining this.
Exposure. Now, Secretary Kennedy was here a couple of weeks ago. And when he was asked about glyphosate and the rollbacks against protections against toxic chemicals, he said that we would, quote, have to ask Lee Zeldin about that. So you're here before us today. Administrator Zeldin, have you ever participated in a meeting with Bayer where you discussed the legal or litigation issues that the company was facing?
No, I never did.
Okay, I have
my meeting with them was very brief and that topic did not come up.
All right, I do. Are you aware of any outreach that they would have in your agency about this?
I could say that I directly had a brief meeting.
Okay.
But it was a brief meet and greet and that topic did not come up.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to submit EPA visitor logs from July 7th, 2025 to the committee.
Without objection, so ordered.
And you're certain they didn't bring up anything regarding your work?
I'm telling you 100%, absolutely. Maybe there was some brainstorming that was done beforehand of potential topics.
Are you aware of any?
That topic was not brought up.
Are you aware of anything brought up to any members of your staff or your team? Your senior team?
I am not aware of that, no.
Okay. I would like to submit to the record some internal emails from the EPA that I have acquired via a Freedom of Information Act submission.
Without objection, so ordered.
We have documentation here, emails from your senior advisor for Agriculture and Rural Affairs saying that you were meeting with the Bayer CEO last year. He said in these emails that they will be bringing up some legal/judicial issues. More specifically, in this internal email in your EPA, it says that Bayer was specifically seeking to and discussing Supreme Court action. They will want an update on EPA's regulatory review. And that, interestingly, Bayer will provide a small thanks for updating the glyphosate webpage from the EPA and work on MAGA. Do you have any idea what?
She's good, isn't she? She really is, holding these people's feet to the fire.
He met with the CEO, but they really didn't talk about the issue that's more important to that company than any other. They really didn't discuss that, according to Zeldin, right?
Yeah. I mean, we need to remember that the Trump and his henchmen, the cabinet, they all think alike. That killing Americans is perfectly acceptable if they are, the working poor, and that really, livelihoods and health outcomes, access to health care and clean air and drinking water, they don't care for any of it. They really don't.
Because you can say that like pesticides affect the food supply, of course, that you can certainly make that scientific argument.
Yeah.
But who it really affects the most is farm workers.
Yes.
And those tend to be migrants or, like you said, lower paying people.
Yes.
It's not even the farm owners. It's the people actually doing the work. So
it's definitely not the farm
people like
owners,
Lee Zeldin and Donald Trump certainly don't care about them.
No. And I just keep coming back to the fact that the current administration is very happy for people to die, whether that be fishermen in boats in the Caribbean Sea, whether it be children, girls in a school in Tehran, or whether it be American citizens protesting freely on the streets of their own nation. That death is kind of it really is the kind of operating manual with which they're working to. And it's so sad. And the rest of the world is watching. And that's why other nations now have completely lost the trust of the United States.
Yeah. And Hegseth still working on that investigation of that girls' school bombing.
Oh, yes.
We still have nothing from the Pentagon about that.
Yeah.
All this over 2 months later. It's still being investigated.
We have
just
to
like
finish.
James Comey. That took 11 months.
Yeah, get their priorities straight there. Okay, we have to finish, but there was so much more we wanted to do, but we'll have to save for another time. You can download the audio podcast to this show. That drops later tonight. Rewind the show, watch it again, share it, comment down below, check out our sponsors there as well, and we'll come back next Wednesday with another Uncovered. Thanks a lot, Ron.
All right. See you next week, everybody.